part of our family, and he enjoyed being there, and we stayed in touch, and we've been in touch since then as well. But this is my farewell from camp. I was gone for the year, and again, I was well prepared for something like that because I had spent so much time just being around strangers and learning how to get along with them and how to talk to them and so on. So again, Woodholme prepared me for a lot of things in life. Most stayed a week or more. 2 weeks was usually the longest, and many have been coming for a number of years, even before we bought it. It was American plan, so everybody sat down to the meals at the same time. And everything was by boat. Every propane, 200-pound propane tank came in by boat. All our groceries came in by boat. All the guests came and left by boat. It was a lot of work, a lot more than it is today. With the road coming in and Helmers can drive up, I'd leave my tank there, they fill it up, and I bring it back down to camp. But we also had to kind of make our own fun as well. There's no kids. Kids, that's not Rudolph, okay? Just so you know. I don't know if you remember the Branch family on Six Lake. This is Kenny. And they would come frequently for Saturday night dinners. And that deer was hanging on the wall just inside the front door. And Ken decided to have a heart-to-heart. Marie Whitehill is just so special to me. Marie worked for IBM down in Newburgh. And she came up for 2 weeks every year. She was single, never married, loved the outdoors, hiking, boating, just anything. And she was the one who took me down and taught me how to play golf. And so every year when she came up, we'd go down and play a couple of times down there. And anytime she was the one that took me to the Adirondack Museum for the first time. So I just had this long affection for this lady, and she was just the sweetest personality you ever wanted to meet. But she did like a little gin and tonic at the end of the day. The gentleman on the left is Dick Smith. Dick was a character. He was the headline editor for Binghamton, I think it was the Binghamton Press. And he would come up with 2 Army duffel bags. One is filled with science fiction books, and the other was half filled with his clothes and the rest of it filled with booze. He was a speed reader. He would read, in the 2 weeks he's there, he'd read 20, 25 books. And the one thing that I'm still amazed at, because I never saw anybody that could do that, he'd go out in the lake, off the dock, put his hands behind his head, cross his feet in front of him, and fall asleep, floating in the lake. I've never seen anybody that had that capability. Dick was a character. You see him with the sunglasses. Well, it was always his birthday every time he came up, and so he's getting the those were called top hats. It's a chocolate cupcake, ice cream in the middle, then to put the other half on top, cover it with chocolate syrup, and so he got his sparkler for his birthday. Lon McAleer, just a great gentleman. He lived in Cortland. He'd come up late August, early September. He had terrible hay fever. And so he would come up. His nickname was Scaramouche. He played the harmonica, all self-taught and so on. And he made these twirly sticks. And he took a stick, he carved little notches in it, put a propeller at the end that he made out of wood, and a pin stuck through it. And then he'd take another stick and he'd rub it. Well, he'd rub it and the thing would spin. And then he'd rub it again and it would go back the other way. And then he'd make it go this way and that way. And he'd never tell you how they did it, but he said, just keep watching. And actually what it was his finger would be either touching the stick or off the stick. and that made it change his directions. But he was just this wonderful guy, and he would, at night around the campfire, he'd play his harmonica, and we'd have these sing-alongs that the Marvin Tabernacle Choir would be impressed with. We had another gentleman who was the first violin for the New York Philharmonic, and he was in this one room. We call it the honeymoon suite. It was a 2-room with a half bath, and every morning after breakfast he would practice. Well, here you are in the middle of the woods listening to this virtuoso violinist, and people just stop. I mean, your jaw dropped as you listen to this man playing this music. So we had a number. We had a New York State Supreme Court Justice, or New York State Appellate Court Justice, I'm sorry, because that's the highest court in New York, as a guest there as well. Families loved Woodholme. The kids had places to go, the swimming, the climbing, the boating, everything. The slide is actually in backwards because you can see the bridge, and the bridge is in the wrong place. The bridge should be over here. But anyways, here's a family. We're taking them back to the Payne's Landing to get their car. The man with the camera and the plaid jacket is the mayor of Binghamton, Joe Esworthy. His wife Maureen is in the white jacket in front of them. They had 7 kids. They would all come up, and when we had the cottage that we now have as our camp, that's where they'd stay because they had extra bedrooms and so on. We had a doctor from Johnson City as well. He came up with his 8 kids, and they stayed over there as well. Another dentist came up with his 7 kids. They used that building. So it was really nice to have that cottage as an extra source of rooms. But whenever anybody was leaving, everybody came down on the dock to wave goodbye. No cars. People would leave the hotel, but we'd have to take them over. They'd pick up their car at Payne's and then go off and do what they wanted to do. The common living room was the main location for gathering, especially at night if you didn't want to be down by the campfire. There were card tables set up, bridge games, pinochle games, rummy. Puzzles were set up and anybody could put pieces in that wanted to. There was a piano off in the corner. Somebody'd sit down and start playing, and the next thing you know, you've got a quartet going over there. And many would just sit on the porch and talk, and some people met there for the first time and became friends. Rainy days were tough. I don't care what week it was, if there were 3 or 4 days of rain, most people were happy. They'd be in the living room reading whatever playing cards or whatever. But there always seemed to be one person who said, "Can't you make the rain stop?" And they'd grumble about it and they'd gripe about it, and they didn't understand that there was nothing we could do to make that rain stop. A hike, we'd do a Bug Lake hike once a week. We'd do a Black Bear hike once a week. Those were 2 of the ones that we could get to right from our hotel. There is a trail up Black Bear from the 7th Lake Road, and it's fairly well marked. We've done it several times now, and this was the trip to Bug Lake. We're actually at Bug Lake. Again, the lean-to, campfires. There's a guitar over the side. Now, when we took it over, the lean-to was fixed up a little bit better. All that's birch bark on the ceiling and walls. And then every spring, we'd take balsam boughs, strip off the needles, and then put it underneath, and then put a carpet over top of it, and fill that lean-to with pillows. And it just, the smell of that balsam, as you sat in there, it was intoxicating. That's me on the left-hand side with my hands. I'm praying that somebody doesn't ask me to do something, because I'm nice and relaxed right there. we again, we were trying to find some things that we could do that people would be entertained, and we built a shuffleboard court. And of course, there's no flat land up there, so we had to build this shuffleboard court on a platform. And people were out there all afternoon, all day, playing shuffleboard. And then this was a black bear hike. And the waitresses would take turns when we had something going on, and they would, so Pat is the girl in the red on the left, and she was climbing Black Bear that week, and then the other girls would kind of pick up the slack for that day, making the beds and so on, and they would switch off, and then the next week somebody else would go. And there's my dad driving that's the barge. You can see a better picture of it now. And oftentimes somebody would have a harmonica or a guitar or something. One guy had a saxophone one night, and he played jazz all around the lake. Unfortunately, that barge was, the bottom was beginning to leak, and we literally had to pull it out of the lake and take it down to the dump. Water skiing. Believe it or not, we had a wooden boat with a 15 horsepower Evinrude on it. That's what we water skied behind. And there wasn't anybody that didn't get up with that water skiing. You know, these 50 and 90 and 100 horsepower, we didn't need it back then. That was amazing. But anyways, anybody that wanted to water ski, we would try to get them up, and a lot of people came away feeling pretty good about themselves. Bald Mountain, Enchanted Forest. Sometimes we go all the way up. That's Santa's Workshop up in Wilmington, New York, up near Lake Placid. And then, of course, the biggest treat was going to the dump to see the bears. Yep. And some of the stupidest people in the world wanted to see those bears because they're walking up to them with their Polaroid cameras. They're throwing things down to entice them to come a little closer. But anyways, that's another story. Some people brought their own talents. We had a number of people who were artists, and they'd bring their easels and so on, and sit down by the waterfront or go off and down to Arnold's Point and do their paintings. And again, here I am, a 7-year-old to 16-year-old kid, and that's what I'm surrounded by, you know. So it really was very enriching. Badminton, we had a badminton court out there. I was teaching this young lady how to get the birdie back and forth. The building on the right was our game room. We had ping pong in there, and occasionally, if the moods got people going, we'd take the ping pong table down and have a dance in there or something. That's Busbird on the right, and Bus would flying up in his plane was a big treat for a lot of people. That's that double-wing Waco that he had, and there was room for 5. So here I am. I'm in my bathroom. I've been swimming in the lake. The people wanted to go up. They had 3 or 4, and nobody else wanted to go. So I'm standing there, you know. And Bus would say, "Want to go?" And then I'd go. So I flew with Bus and later with Don probably 60 times over the course of the years I was there. And now, of course, we fly with Jimmy and Tommy. But yeah, that was the biggest treat for me to fly in that airplane. And then I gave dancing lessons on Saturday nights. Even without all my teeth, it still worked. Mail, of course, was delivered by boat, and these were the 2 mail bags. We had it was located on the wall right under where that red-nosed deer was on the way out to the front porch. People put their letters and cards in the morning, and then when the mailboat came in, we'd go down and switch bags, the incoming bag and the outgoing bag. And that bag is still hanging on the wall at Woodholme. You can see Harley H.R. Brown is kind of faded, but it's still there. And you know, sometimes you just had to relax. So Chief sit on bottom, that's my dad. And you see the walkway came right down to the dock. Hammocks and lounge chairs and so on along the lawn on the right, and the campfire and the log and chairs and so on the left. And there was always time for a serenade. That's in the living room. You can see the fireplace behind. That's my mom in the chair and my dad with the ukulele. And here I am practicing for the U.S. Open. I was making a fashion statement too, so that was part of the attire. But I still play golf. So I started at age 12, and 60 years later, still enjoying it. I work there on 2 days a week, so I get to know the course really well.
Is it an inlet golf course?
It is, yeah. That was back. What's his name? The pro. Roland Christie was the pro at the time. The clubhouse, which is now a storage building, but it was approximately where the garage for the carts is now. And the ninth tee, you could hit the ball from the tee. It would hit the roof of the clubhouse, roll down the roof, and onto the green. So they had wire on the windows on that whole side, because otherwise it would get broke. But what I do is, we didn't have days off. I mean, there was no day off at the hotel. But Sunday after lunch, after the pots and pans were done and so on, I'd hop in my boat, go down to Birds, get out with my clubs, go up to the golf course, and I'd play starting probably around 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd play until I couldn't see. And then I'd come back. It was only 9 holes at that time. I'd get back in the boat and come back to the hotel. So that was my day off. It was from 3 till about 8 o'clock at night. But that was, to me, that was the greatest, because I had that freedom to just be off on my own. And so there were families, and oftentimes there were kids my age, so it was kind of nice. And so we played like kids played, especially after I got my chores done. But so those were all those pillows in the lean-to, and so we built ourselves a fort, and we held off the charging attackers from taking over our fort. Now there was a custom in Woodholme, and it has started way before we took it over. You did not wear a tie in the dining room. Most guests knew that rule, and if they chose to wear a tie, it was because they did it on purpose. And of course, there would be a big ceremony. My dad would come in with his tray. He'd have a pair of hedge clippers on it. He'd have a white apron on, and they'd come over and clip the tie. And then we had a whole wall full of these ties. And this one time, I was probably about, maybe 9 or 10. The guests decided that they were going to turn the tables. So the guy wore the tie. He comes in, my dad comes in, cuts it off, and he gets irate. It's just playing along, but he gets irate. And 3 other guys pick up my dad down the walk and throw him in the lake. I'm 10 years old. These guys are manhandling my dad, so I'm in tears sitting on the boardwalk there, and these guys felt so bad after they did it. But that happened all the time. People were just constantly having fun with each other, and of course the whole tie thing was very much a part of that. Bill and Lynn very nicely saved some of those ties, and they put them in a little shadow box, and it's hanging at Woodholme today. So a couple of those I think are pretty expensive ties, but oh well, you know the rule. And then we'd had a pajama day, so everybody wore their pajamas to breakfast and just had fun, and that's the kind of thing you did. It was very much a family hotel, a family resort. There's a little tea set there in the middle. The Clampetts came one particular weekend or week stay. You just didn't know what people were going to do. And they had planned this before they got there. They bring all this stuff with them. And here they are, dressed up like hillbillies. As you left, there was a big rock just to the, it would be to the left of the picture we're looking at here. And it was a wishing rock. So as you left, you dropped your coin in. If it landed and stayed on the rock, your wish would be granted. And the rock is still there. Unfortunately, we can't find any more of the coins. But and yeah, again, you can see the lawn furniture and stuff that we were there, that people would just sit and relax. And sometimes people would get kind of serious, and again, what in the world they were doing, I have no clue. But obviously, this was dress-up day. I think it's Tarzan and Jane, but I'm not sure. We had a water bike. It was supposed to be for one person. These people decided that two would fit, and it didn't quite work. But it's hard to see, but we had a contest. I don't even remember what the contest was, but it was breakfast in bed, except you had to come to the dining room. We had a cot set there and a little table on the side, and he got his breakfast in bed. Now, the guests were always, pulling pranks and so on. This particular gentleman, Jack Johnsing, I think is the name, he wrote this letter to the Lawsons, they were the people before us, with all the complaints. And he said the health department he wrote a letter to the health department complaining that there was a fly in the ice cube, those plastic, gross eyes in the potatoes. They didn't whitewash the white birch trees. The bed linen was too short. One of the waitresses also were the chambermaids, and they would make the beds and so on every day. And if a guest was giving them a little bit of a hard time and fooling around with them, they'd short sheet the bed. And if you know what that is, they take the top sheet and fold it so that when you go to put your feet in, it only goes halfway. Okay. And there was a black widow spider that somebody put on somebody's chair. And these were all complaints that they were making about staying at Woodholme. And some people just, they just enjoyed it so much they had to put it down in a song. And Clara Winchell, my mom was a nurse, registered nurse, and Clara and Barbara, and I can't think of Barbara's last name and it's cut off, they were classmates of hers. And they would come up to the hotel. And so they wrote this about Aunt Lou, little song. I can't remember what the tune is. Home on the Range, okay. And I'm not going to sing it, but give us a cook like good sweet Lou. She's one who is always true blue. And they sang this at dinner one night. Again, same two ladies, and just about staying at Woodholme and all the fun and just the camaraderie that they had. Every January, my parents would write a letter to all the guests who had come the year before, and what Jim was doing, what Bill was doing, what Dick was doing, and so on and so forth. And that would go out, and it would be kind of a reminder, make your reservations now for the next year, But that was a yearly letter that we sent out. And then the season was over. Spring and fall were two different experiences at camp. The first 2 years we stayed there, we were in school in Old Forge. Rather than go to Inlet for just a little while and then switch to Old Forge, we just went to Old Forge. So every morning, my brother and I would get in a boat, go from Woodholme over to Paynes, and then pick up the school bus there. Except some mornings, in the spring and fall, that fog gets pretty thick. So we always had a contest, and we'd take turns. Who could drive straight across from from Woodholme to Paynes without getting turned around? And we'd find ourselves over on the South Shore. We'd find ourselves going towards Arnold's Point. you just had no clue that you actually had made that turn. But we did that in the spring and fall, and then in the winter we moved down to Old Forge for 2 years, 2 winters. In the fall, of course, the lake goes down. This is probably early November, and if you've never been up here when the lake is that low, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things you can see along the shoreline. This rock was just down from the hotel, and it's almost like a cube, like it's been cut. And we're just about ready to leave. You can see up in the upper left-hand corner, the upper center, the ice is starting to form. Okay, so we've got to get out because that's the only way we're going to get in. Everything's closed up, and we're ready to leave. Adirondacks League Club used to be able to go in and feed these herds of deer that were out there. And I mean herds. There were like 30, 40, 50 of them at a time. And they had buckets of grain and hay that they used to put out. And of course, Winter Carnival at Old Forge was always special. Maple Ridge was right behind the school. And every morning we would go with our skis to school. There'd be a big rack along the outside of it. You'd put your skis there. And for our gym class, which was an hour long, we'd be over at Maple Ridge. Now, one of the reasons for that was our phys ed teacher was also the ski coach. So he's kind of keeping an eye on people and seeing how they're doing. But the Ice Palace was always built right at the bottom of Maple Ridge. And this is where they cut the ice. This is Old Forge Pond. So all of these machines, it took many, many man-hours to do this. Saw, then they had a chainsaw that they were using as well. I'm sorry they're dark, but these were that's the way they came out. That block of ice is about 18 inches thick. That's my brother coming down the hill at Maple Ridge. And this was my gold medal run at Alpine. We had 2 hills. Maple Ridge was the main one. And during the week, all the town kids got to ski there. But on the weekend, the kids from Rome and Utica and Syracuse would come up skiing, and Maple Ridge was packed. So they'd throw us over on Alpine, and then the other kids, the other people could ski on Maple Ridge. Macaulay was built the second year we were there, the second winter. So all the skiing was done originally here on Maple Ridge and Alpine. And so this was Winter Carnival, and they had ski races and so on. Hank Keough, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but Hank was a great skier here. He and I were classmates. We're part of the ski club racing my second year. Hank went on to ski in the Olympics in 1972 and went on to a very successful pro career as well as a skier. And this was just a little bit before the 72 Olympics. And you can see this, the ski wear is not the most fashionable, but it kept us warm. There was a ski jump, I don't know if you've ever known it, but there's a ski jump where the Little League field is, across from the church. That ski jump came down, and the landing area and so on was right there by the where that Little League field is now. I think it was a 20-meter jump or something. It wasn't huge, 40. But 40 meter?
It was 40 meter. Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the locals taking off. This is all natural snow too, folks. There's no snowmaking back then. The Winter Carnival dance, that's my mom and dad. The Winter Carnival basketball game in the old gym. They had guys on each other's shoulders playing basketball. Again, this was a big event for the community in the winter. Snowmobiles weren't really there at that particular time. And then, as the snow melted and the ice broke up, we'd come back into inlet. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a drugstore on the. Actually, let me. I can. Yes, but I can zoom it up a little bit right here, and there's the drugstore, and there's the Gaiety Theater. and the Texaco station. Okay.
Okay.
Is this the parquet here?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes.
Because it looks like it should be over here,
No.
but
Well, that's where the parquet behind Northern Lights is.
That's right,
On the
okay.
right. The other one was the Parquet Hotel and Rathskeller.
oh,
In the
okay,
restaurant.
got it. All right,
You got both parquets there.
yeah. And that brings us to springtime in the Adirondacks and another season. So that's life at Woodholme.
Wonderful.
Questions?
Did the whole family live in Old Forge over
Yes.
winter?
Yeah.
And any particular winter jobs or anything?
Well, my mom was a registered nurse and she did some private nursing, but it wasn't consistent enough. And my dad worked for Henry Keough at the Old Forge Hardware the first year, and the second year he worked at Macaulay Mountain. Macaulay was just finished that year, and they had a T-bar at the time. I don't know if you've ever ridden a T-bar, but your weight pulls the T-bar down. Well, as I'm going up the mountain, it's like this, everything's fine, and then there's a little dip like this, and then it goes back up again. Well, I didn't have enough weight to hold the T-bar down, so the first time I went up, I'm going along, and all of a sudden, I'm up in the air, spinning around, and I'm hoping that I'm going to land facing up the mountain. So then somebody taught me a trick, and when I got to that point, I slid off the T-bar, held onto it with my hands, and I kept my feet on the ground. So I was able to do that until I had gained enough weight to keep the T-bar down. Any other thoughts or questions? Or
Oh,
that's all right.
did you build any good enough friendships with any of the guests' kids that they ended up pitching in on your chores?
No, they were smart enough. They were smart enough not to do
No
that.
Tom Sawyer deals.
Yeah, I did have some good friendships, and some of those lasted for quite a while. Yeah.
What did
Very
you
nice.
Very
Very
nice.
You mentioned closed weed early on.
Yes. That camp with the bee on the chimney,
Yeah,
that was his camp.
okay.
Yep. He then took over Covewood up on Big Moose, but he originally had a camp on Seventh Lake. Yep.
When did the road go in?
Went in two sections. Well, first of all, Seventh Lake House owned the three cottages, Jeannie, yours, the one that you guys rent, and then the Lasky camp. They were part of the hotel, and so the road went there. And then at some point it got added on, and it went down to Don Wickman's garage. And then in 1985 we finally